Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today we have an interview, but what I want to say or start off to introduce this guest is that she had me at her one line in an email she sent to me. And this one line was, she was talking about a previous guest, Carrie Baker. And she said, "You can also confirm with Carrie that I'm reasonably stable and a very passionate person." And I was like, oh, she's my lady. She's my person. I feel like that is, I don't know. It's exciting. You know, I love passion, and also I love a reasonably stable person who's also passionate. So it was a yes for me. We took a long time. She was the most patient person ever. And we have this conversation that was born here this week. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Kim. Kim is a longtime children's and student ministry leader who has spent decades also supporting foster and adoptive families. She's passionate about creating spaces where every child, no matter their background, behavior, or abilities, can belong, contribute, and grow. I mean, don't you love her already? Kim is a TBRI practitioner, a trauma-free world affiliate trainer, and holds master's degrees in family ministry and business administration. She loves collaborating with children's ministry leaders to make churches more welcoming, especially for kids with trauma backgrounds, disabilities, or neurodivergence. She's a frequent speaker on topics related to trauma, disability, and neurodivergence, and the author of Boundless Hope for Every Child, and host of the Every Child Belongs podcast. Kim and her husband, Mark, live in the greater Cincinnati area and love spending time with their family, which includes 11 grandkids. And in the conversation, I think she says they all live within like a mile of each other or something crazy. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting jealous in a nice way, in a generous way. So this conversation is going to be an especially good one for you if you feel like maybe even a little hurt and you feel frustrated and have struggled to find places of belonging, especially in the places that should be the most welcoming, which, you know, Kim and I both agree would be faith communities. So without further ado, let's welcome Kim. Welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thank you, Kara. I'm glad to be here.
All right, we're going to have a fun conversation. Let's start with setting the stage, a little bit of who you are, where you came from, where you are now, a little snapshot of both your life now, but kind of how you became and kind of arrived at where you're at now.
Sure. So I live in northern Kentucky, but it's considered greater Cincinnati area. I'm 3 miles from downtown Cincinnati. We have 5 children. The youngest 2 joined our families through adoption, one at the age 10, one at the age 15, so that we learned a lot of our parenting strategies weren't effective, actually harmful with their daughters. We have.
You thought you knew. You probably thought, I got this nailed. We did such a good job with these 3. Like, we got this.
Well, actually, I mean, that's why we adopted, because we were such awesome parents. We wanted other children to benefit from our parenting, but then our daughters taught us a new way to parent. And then we have 11 grandkids, which all live within a mile and a half from us, which is amazing. I am a longtime kids and student pastor. My passion has always been, even in high school, like when I would work vacation Bible school or different camps, I was always the one with the kids in my group, typically the boys, that nobody else wanted in their group. I was the one at the airport. If there's a mom with a kid with a meltdown, I carry stickers and stuff in my purse and I'll go over and sit on the floor. I mean, those are the kids that I really enjoy. And I didn't realize really until I was an adult that not everybody enjoys those kids.
Not everyone gravitated and some people are running away.
Right. So as far as my family, we have a couple kids who are neurodivergent. We have some grandkids that are neurodivergent. And then, of course, our daughters from being adopted have experienced trauma. And what I realized is so often these kids are misunderstood. They can't find a place to belong because they're different. I mean, there's not a deficit, but the world is created for a certain kind of person. It's the typical person, which to me, the box of what's typical is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which means we're leaving out more and more people. So my passion is helping people understand, how do we welcome every kid? Like, what does that mean? Because it's not about getting the kid to comply and act the way we want them to. It's about us changing, which we'd rather not do that. We'd rather just give them a pill and a directive and then it's all good.
I love how you say it, how it is. Yeah, I think that's when and this goes not just for this space, but I think, as our culture is kind of recognizing how we as a society and culture have treated people, right. We have to recognize, we have to actually change how we're showing up, what we believe. We have to give away some of the power that we've enjoyed for so many years. And these are hard things. And that's why we're talking about them. We're going to talk about belonging. And before we get there, you have a particular, I think, certification training. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's TBRI, which I think stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention.
Very good, Kara. You got it.
Thank you.
You got it.
What is that?
It's a training. It's particularly to help people engage with kids who've experienced trauma. And it's all based on relationship and connection. And I became familiar with that when we adopted our two youngest and realized how important it was to connect with our brand new daughters and that relationship was the focus, not compliance every moment. And then in the church, what I realized is we had more and more kids who were differently wired or disabled. Because the principles of TBRI are based on connection to relationship, that works in any situation. I mean, Kara, it works with our spouses when we're having a hard time with them. If we focus on connection and relationship, the outcomes are much better.
Yeah, I can definitely picture that. Let's even get a little bit more tactical, practical.
Yeah.
What would be perhaps something, let's see if we can think of something on the fly here. Perhaps a behavior that is based in trauma that you might encounter. And how would relationship then be how would you engage in relationship? So I'm sure you can think of an encounter you had with a child. Maybe you did know, maybe you didn't. That was something that you could see was based in trauma. Does something come to mind?
Right. Well, first of all, a lot of times we're not going to know that it's based on trauma.
Good point.
So that's why I think too many people, they'll come to me and say, well, how do I know if the kid's behavior is based on trauma or not? So I know how to respond. I'm like, well, you don't need to have a diagnosis or a label to be kind and compassionate and curious with a kid. So that being said, if we are practicing these trauma-informed principles, if we see a kid who is not behaving in the manner which we want them to behave, rather than immediately try to stop the behavior, we take a minute, we take a breath, we make sure that we ourselves are regulated and that our face is calm. And then Dr. Karen Purvis, who is a pioneer in working with kids from trauma, she says, connect before you correct. So what that would mean is, let's say we have a sibling who, let's say our daughter, who has only been living in the family for a year, 11 years old, a brother's being a typical brother and take something. And she just has this response that seems huge. Rather than yell at her and say, settle down, which even that, I mean, yelling at somebody to settle down, which is conveying that we're not settled down. But so rather than yell at her, instead, we make sure we're calm and we connect with her, which could be as easy as, Anastasia, it seems like you're really frustrated with your brother right now. It only takes a couple seconds. What that immediately does, it helps them understand I'm on your side. I'm here to help. And then we can go in correction mode and talk about, if we don't hit our brother over the head with a stock pot, or she never ever did that. But I think too often we go straight to correction and we miss that opportunity to connect with the kid. And if we're about discipline and getting a kid to comply, discipline happens best in the context of relationship. And relationships are built through shared fun experiences. So you want your kid to comply with you more? Well, then why don't you play a game of trouble and go out and do some sidewalk chalk with them? Because that's building your relationship.
This all makes so much sense. I was thinking of, so at the time that we're recording, we just passed July 4th weekend, or the holiday weekend. And on the 4th, our family went to the beach, and a lovely time. And we actually didn't have Levi with us. He was at camp. And so we chose to go to a beach that you kind of have to hike into. It was super fun because he's not able to do that with us. But my daughter was collecting seaweed and playing in the water, and she wanted me to hold her seaweed. So I was sitting there watching her and holding a bunch of seaweed. And this little girl came up to me and started grabbing the seaweed out of my hand. And it was one of those things where I think I didn't expect it. Right. And so it kind of caught me off guard. And it's funny because I'm laughing because I'm literally, it's like seaweed, right? Really not a lot of value to this item.
And there's a whole bunch of it.
There's a whole bunch of it. So it's not like I wanted I didn't care about the seaweed, but my daughter had asked me to hold it for her. And so that's where the whole, for me, it was oh my gosh, this is my daughter's seaweed. I was caught in this really awkward, but not important, but I can also laugh about it because how not important it is. Right.
Right.
But so this girl's doing this, and her dad, here's my guess. My guess is that she is neurodivergent or has some disability because of her size and just the way that she was acting and the way that her dad spoke to her. I kind of was I'm not totally, the language might not have been developed.
Right.
I don't know. I have no idea. But that was my guess. And so it's just this interesting experience for me to recognize, to kind of be confronted with the discomfort of what it takes to move aside from our own little bubbles, but to be curious and non-judgmental. Because I can totally see somebody that would happen to somebody, and to be can you believe that dad let that girl do that? And so I think this is the time that I feel the most thankful for having a child who's disabled, because I think I can more quickly get out of my own little headspace and judgmental mind to think about the alternative story that might be going on that I have no idea about. So I don't know. That was a little bit of a tangent, but I think going back to, I think the reason I brought that story up is because we don't know, to your point about how do we respond, when someone's acting out of trauma? You said, we don't know. We don't know when they're acting from trauma. And I think the story I brought forth is we don't know if someone's disabled or not. And actually, it doesn't matter. Any way you put it, it's a call forth to be generous and kind and curious. I think you said these 3 words that I'm that basically is, if I have people leaving this podcast, not just this episode, but all the episodes, and they take on more kindness, not just for others, but for themselves.
Right.
More compassion, again, not for others, but for themselves. And more curiosity, same situation, then that would be mission accomplished. So anyhow.
Right. But wait a minute, Kara, I want to know what you did with the little girl on the beach.
Okay. Yeah. So what I did was I tried to explain to my daughter, basically it's it's the beach, it's loud, right? So I don't know how much I actually was able to communicate, but I let her take a piece of seaweed, which really wasn't letting her because she grabbed it.
Right.
So that happened. And I really was trying to coach my daughter, be it's okay. We have plenty of seaweed. She wanted to play with one I don't know. I kind of tried to explain it to my daughter, like, it's going to be fine. And I tried to kind of make conversation with the dad because I was like, oh, we could bond over like having disabled kids. And I don't know that we did that, but I did find out he was here on vacation. So that was fun. And so I just tried to coach my daughter and laughed with the dad. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm sorry about the seaweed situation. I'm not trying to hoard the seaweed. And we kind of laughed about it, but that's what I did. So
nice.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And you're right. You're talking about, we don't know if a kid's experienced trauma or not, but what we do know is every kid we encounter has a story that we don't know, even if it's our own kid. I mean, our own kid, and we think we know everything about our kid, and they might come home from school and just be in a terrible, terrible mood, but we don't know what happened with their friends that day. We don't know what a teacher may have said to them in the hall. I mean, there's always things about a kid we don't know. And talking about curiosity, and you were also talking about judgmental, because I think we're so quick to judge. What I found is if I'm curious, if I'm thinking, I wonder what it's like, is this about the seaweed or does he just want to get close to me? I get curious. I can't be judgmental. If we're being curious, we can't judge because we're asking questions and trying to figure out what we're seeing, what that means, and what the need is of the person in front of us.
Yeah, it's almost like curiosity is the kryptonite of judgment. Where they
that's good.
That is good.
That's good. I'm
like
write that down. T-shirt, Kara. T-shirt.
T-shirt. That's a good one. I love that idea. And what I was also thinking when you're saying that is curiosity just feels so much better for us, right? So whether or not the person that we're being with or we're observing or whatever has an impact, it has an impact on us and how we show up in the world.
Absolutely.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit. And I want to talk about, ultimately, I think belonging for our kids. And I mentioned earlier, I want to start with a personal story. And I want it to help kind of kick us off to, I think, a fundamental challenge that many of us mothers are experiencing. And I think this happens a lot of places. And so we're going to talk about those places: school, church, city opportunities, camps, and all that kind of stuff. All the different places I think this occurs. And I think it's, for me, and I think a lot of other moms, I think it's particularly confronting because we're already so tired. Right. So it's like,
always tired.
We have to go change this fundamental issue where ultimately my child doesn't have a space where they can belong in a way that works for them. And so the story I'm going to use to kick us off is something that happened this last fall, or maybe it's a conversation that happened this last fall that really sticks into my mind. And we were having a conversation, meaning, back and forth for several months with the school, because they were voicing concern that they were not sure that they could meet the needs of my son. And my husband and I were very open to that conversation. We were working with our advocate, and it wasn't a black and white answer. I do feel very confident looking back that it really came down to not wanting to create a place of belonging for him. Mm-hmm. That it became too much work.
Yeah.
Ultimately. I think. And not work that couldn't be done without care. All that needed to change is the commitment to asking what's missing versus thinking we've done all this and it's still not working, which is a very different conversation.
Right.
But anyhow, that's what happened with school. But so we were kind of already having a challenge with his belonging and his support. And there was a conversation. I'll kind of set the scene a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, there was a behavior that had happened that day. And so I was called to the school into the back room where the school dean, which is kind of the vice principal, and his behaviorist, my son, were kind of locked away. And so I came into this room and we're having this conversation, kind of breaking down what happened, what was going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. And the school administrator started to try to paint the vision of somewhere out there that was going to be a better fit for Levi. Basically saying, this isn't going to be the best
not here.
For Levi. Not here. And I had a very raw response to that,
Of
which
course.
looked like crying
Of
and
course.
really pleading and saying, there's no place for my son. And I really was pushing back on what she was saying because she was operating under this idea, this false idea that there's somewhere out there that magically my son will fit. And I was so clear. I was like, no, no, no. Like, that's a delusion. And I love that you think that because that lets you sleep at night.
Right.
But if you don't make a space for him here, he has nowhere unless I create it. And so it's my job to create it. And so I had a real, again, raw response for that. And I'm glad, right? Like, do I like to show up messy? No. Do I like to cry in front of people? Not really. But I am also glad I let that out and really push back on this belief. So I wanted to start with that story because whether it's at school or I think even more heartbreaking is whether it's at church.
Oh, yes.
Where there's, I think ignorance, I think is a good way of saying like what's happening in the space. That it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And then we as moms find ourselves in this intersection of seeing the impact of our children and also kind of all, like I said earlier, like maybe defeated or exhausted and not really knowing where to go. So I wanted to open the conversation to just kind of hear how you think about creating spaces of belonging, both from the perspective of a mother, but also as somebody who has been a leader in this space.
Mm-hmm. First of all, I want to say that story's heartbreaking.
It is. Thank you for saying, yeah.
That should not be happening. And I mean, I'm hoping that there were all kinds of conversations before that about what his interests are and what his strengths are. But I find that a lot of times those conversations aren't happening. But as far as creating a sense of belonging for the kid, it starts with our mindset. Mm-hmm. If we are going in saying, this isn't a place for Levi, there's unicorns and rainbows someplace else, and he could just magically go there and it's going to be amazing. If we start with the mindset that this is not the place for the kid, our behavior is going to be in line with that this is not the place for the kid. And so when I'm working, especially with, I do with churches and nonprofits too, but especially with churches, because I believe church should absolutely be the place that every kid, every family can find their place. And it's not happening. I don't know if you saw the new statistics by Baylor University and Eric Carter came out. Almost half of families with kids who are disabled or have special needs have left at least one church. Most of them have left multiple churches. I talk to families all the time. And for the church, the belonging part starts with us looking at these kids as fearfully and wonderfully made, as amazing creations, as kids who have unique interests and unique skills. But too often we focus on the difference. And I love Temple Grandin. She says it's a difference, not a deficit. And just because somebody is wired differently, just because Levi responds differently, maybe to sensory input or to criticism, doesn't make him deficient. It just makes him different. So us as the adults need to know if correction needs to be made with Levi because of the things he's experienced and what's happening in his brain, we are going to have to change in the way that we deliver that. And too often what we're trying to do is fix the kid and make them change. And I mean, how boring would that be if everybody just responded in the same way? So as far as creating belonging, it's looking for what do we need to do in our environments to make it feel safe for them. There's a guy, I can't remember, it was Alexander somebody, and he said, when a flower doesn't grow, you fix the environment, not the flower.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's the same way with kids. If a kid is not doing what we think is expected in the environment, we need to look at the environment and go, well, what do we need to change? And I'll give you a super simple example that I use a lot. And my grandson, who's autistic, he also has CVI, which is a visual processing impairment. So sometimes he can see stuff, but he can't actually put it all together. And he was in preschool, and the preschool teachers were getting super aggravated because every day they told him where to put his backpack in his locker and where to sit. And every day he'd put his stuff in the wrong locker and sit at the wrong desk.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a clue. Like if we keep telling the kid the same thing over and over again and they're not doing it, well, the problem's us. Like we need to figure that out. But they brought in a vision.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, louder, more articulate, but doing the same thing over and over again is not going to change the outcome. So they brought in a vision specialist. The vision specialist is listening, explaining his visual impairment again.
Mm-hmm.
And then she whipped out a roll of red tape and she outlined his locker and then she outlined his desk. And then she told him, here's your locker, showed him how to do his backpack, hang his backpack up there in his desk. Guess what happened the next day, Kara? Guess where he put his backpack?
Nailed the backpack, nailed the desk. Yeah.
Right. And so that's a simple example of if a kid isn't doing what we expect, then we need to dig underneath and say, why not? For him, he simply couldn't, in that row of lockers and those row of desks, he couldn't identify which his was. And then when he went to kindergarten, they passed on the red tape thing. And when I went to grandparents' day, here this sweet little boy is sitting at his desk, outlined in red tape. And then also what they did, they went the extra step. And when I talk to churches, I'm like, if the school can do this, the church should do this too. He was having trouble navigating steps. And they knew the red tape helped with his desk. So a school employee got on their hands and knees and put red tape on the edge of every single step in the school so he could feel more confident as he walked through the school. So what I say to people is, what's the red tape? Like, what do you need to do to change the environment to make it safer, to make it more welcoming? Because if a kid wants to belong, if we want a kid to belong, they got to feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if they feel scared on the steps, or if they can't find their physical desk to sit, they're not going to feel like they belong.
Yeah, I love the kind of call out. It's like, if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again,
right.
and the kid's not doing it, like the kid's not the problem.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm thinking about all these things. It sounds so glaring when we're talking about it right now, but I think if we looked at different aspects, I think of so many off the top of my head right now in our own life that I'm like, yeah, we're trying to do the same thing over and over again. And then
right.
we're frustrated that it's not working. So kind of going back to, and we're going to pick on churches right now. Why?
Kara, we're going to encourage churches.
That's what we're doing. But you know what?
And we're going to call them out. We're going to call them out.
We are, because I think it's like you and I both know that who Jesus ministered to the most was the disabled. It was the sick, disabled, poor, the outcast, the people that everybody else rejected. Right. Would you augment anything and say it differently?
No, he advocated for the marginalized, and he loved children. There's a couple in the Gospels examples or retelling of the story where parents were bringing their kids to Jesus for him to lay hands on them. Mm-hmm. And in Mark, it says that as the disciples were, kind of pushing the kids away, that Jesus got mad. He got angry. And I'm like, oh, this is good. So when I get mad at a church, when I get angry because they're not welcoming, exactly, no. Mm-hmm. But I believe that if Jesus he is here right here with us, but I think he's speaking to us. He's going, I welcomed every kid. You want to be like me? Welcome every kid. And when he was saying that, the parents were bringing their kids for Jesus to lay hands on them. I doubt that it was this orderly, all the kids standing there with their little hands inside their robes. And, I think kids were fighting over dreidels. They were kicking rocks. They were asking for snacks. But somehow we have this distorted image of what it looks like. And my daughter-in-law, actually, because I came home from a conference once, I said, that picture of Jesus in the hall with all the kids in the white robes, and they're all super compliant. They're all looking at him. I said, that is setting up the wrong expectation. I believe, and she goes, well, what do you think it looked like? And I said, I think there were people crying. I think there were kids under tables, on tables, spilling stuff, double dipping the goldfish. So she actually created an image of this that now is in churches across the country of Jesus with kids that are acting like
his
kids.
Back pulling his hair.
Well, there's actually, it's a girl standing at his back, braiding his hair. I mean,
that's much nicer.
Yeah, there's but we get confused as far as what realistic expectations of kids are. And as far as the church, like my heart for the church, I believe that most church leaders want to provide a place for every kid, but I think they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
They think they don't have the resources, the people, that they're afraid they'll do something wrong. And what I say is just take a step towards that kid or family and ask what the kid loves. I had a church that a kid couldn't stay in their room forever. And he talked about Matchbox cards. The volunteers like, oh my gosh, all the time. That's all we'll talk about is Matchbox cards. So the leader said, oh, so he really loves Matchbox cars. So that's his interest. And the leader started thinking. The next week brought in 3 Matchbox cars. And guess what happened? The kid who could never stay in the room the whole time stayed in the room the whole time with his 3 little Matchbox cars that sometimes he would line up, sometimes he put in his pocket. So it's just being curious about what a kid loves. And I would love if the church was the example to other places of what it looked like to accept kids as they are. That doesn't mean we still have boundaries. We still have expectations. But sometimes our expectations are such that some kids simply are not able to meet them, which means they're unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, you kind of answered a question I was going to ask, which was kind of where do people get so stuck with this? Like, why are there so many church spaces that families and children don't feel welcome? And I think what I heard you say was they get a little overwhelmed and maybe a little bit of fear, of like not doing it right. And would you add anything to that?
I think too, we can be really rigid in the way we think the hours should go. Or I think we're also rigid and we think louder, brighter, more crowded is more fun. And actually, it's not just kids who are neurodivergent. I mean, there are typically developing kids that have trouble with that. So I think being flexible, look at what would be the best for every kid. I mean, maybe we need to put gels in our fluorescent lights. Maybe we need to turn the sound down a couple notches. Maybe we need to have buckets of fidgets in every room. I mean, so I think flexibility is another thing that's really important.
Okay, so let's shift to talk a little bit about kind of our role as basically moms, right? So whether it is a mom trying, and I actively am in this right now with Levi. So at our church, I would say we're hobbling through in terms of it's not a place where we as parents feel safe. I think Levi probably feels safe, but he also probably feels like he wants to do more than we'll let him do because we don't have the mechanics in place to be able to feel safe.
And why do you not feel safe? Why do you not feel safe there?
Because the behaviors that he have. Okay, so if we are not there actively supervising, the things that will happen is stealing. The things that do happen is stealing, food overconsumption. And this is more about other people feeling uncomfortable, which I care a little bit less about, but just like social nuances.
Right.
Like that's going to just happen. But I think the thing, like, so, we live in a coastal area. So in the summer, the church youth group does a beach night every Wednesday night. Well, firstly, Levi has a really hard time walking on sand. Secondly, during that time of the day, he needs access to a bathroom. And then thirdly, there's like food there, which is going to be unregulated for him. At our home, we regulate all food for him. He does not self-regulate. Well, I should say he does self-regulate, but he regulates to like eating all the things. So that is not a safe situation for Levi. So we don't necessarily have solutions to those problems. We have engaged in conversations with the church and they are ongoing, but I think our urgency is a little bit more than theirs. We feel the pain more than they do.
Right.
And so that's where it's like I find myself in this place of, okay, like what's next? So we've started conversations and there's a willingness. There is a willingness, I would say, on their part. They do have a desire, I would say. And so I guess let's talk about, where do I go from here? What would you suggest to someone like me, or to me, since I'm right here, as a next step to create a place where Levi can really belong without myself or my husband being his one-on-one support?
Yeah, well, first I would look at, what's your goal? And I think the church should be asking you that. What is your goal? Is it that he gets to beach night? Or is it that he has peers that he meets with regularly,
Mm-hmm.
where he is, you know, I don't know, a goal might be growing in his faith, or maybe just getting increased socialization. I think we got to figure out the goal first, because it might not be about beach night. It
Mm-hmm.
might be about creating another environment during the week, in a more secure environment with a bathroom nearby, with very limited food options. And I think too often what we do is we're asking the wrong question. It's like, well, should he go to beach night or not? Yes or no? We don't need a yes or no question. We need to determine what the goal is, and then what might we do in order to achieve that goal, to get Levi in a regular rhythm of meeting with his peers outside of the home. And then you go from there.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because I think also, so interestingly, I have a typical son who attends the same youth group and loves beach night, right? Like, and that's totally,
Right.
I mean, I grew up doing that, right? And so I think, what I want to digest is saying, it's like, we're not saying don't do beach night, right? Beach night might not be necessary for Levi to reach his goals, which is for
Right.
him to participate in activities that he wants to participate in, that are part of his church community. And so
Right.
like that could be summer camp, that could be winter camp, or whatever the things they do. It doesn't have to be beach night. And I think that's where I guess the call out of rigidity goes both ways, because
Right.
I think
Yeah.
churches or places can be rigid, but I also think we can too, right? Where it's, if we get attached to like, it has to look this way, it has to look the same, I think we can get tripped up there. Whereas the same is not necessarily what our kids need. But I
No.
think going back to the goal and really getting in touch with like, what's the mission that we're on here? And I think the mission is to find a place of belonging for Levi, and a way that he can participate and enjoy himself as a 16-year-old, and not have his mom and dad hovering over him at church.
Right. Well, we're trying to determine what is best for that particular child. And I have a mom who shared, she had a kid who was autistic, went to this little Catholic church, little bitty town near us, and First Communion was coming up. And she was dreading it, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard. And the priest, doesn't have kids, but came up to her and said, I'm thinking about First Communion and just the noise and the different, environment, and what would be best for your child. And the mom was floored. She didn't even know how to respond at first, because she had never thought about what's best for my kid. She was thinking about, how do I get my kid so he can participate in this thing that everybody else is participating in? The priest then, and talking with the parents, came up with the idea. They had a midweek First Communion for this little kid. And this priest did the program, did the flowers. The kid determined who was going to come. So it was all familiar faces. It's now a couple years later. He can now take communion with the rest of his church family. But I think churches just asking the simple question, what would be best for the kid? I had a church they had a family that had a couple kids who were disabled, neurodivergent. Getting through food line on Wednesday was a big deal. And they wanted a table close to the end of the food line. And the church said, well, we can't do that because that wouldn't be fair to other people. And I went, well, are other people having trouble getting through the line? Actually, I think not only should you give them a table close to the end of the line, you should also have volunteers waiting for them when they get out of the car and help the kids go through the line. One thing because we were going to just have people prepare plates for them, but the kids loved being able to pick their own food. So they wanted to go through the line, but it was too hard for the parents. So it's not about being fair. I mean, it's doing what's best.
Go back to that question. So I would have a hard time responding, I think, with kind, compassionate curiosity to that question, calling myself out. Were you able, so in that conversation with the person that responded that way, were you able to help them see beyond kind of where they were stuck? Like, how did
Oh,
that
for
go?
sure.
Okay.
Yes. It went really, really well. And that's one thing too. I think sometimes as leaders, we're so worried about the perception. Are we
Yeah.
showing favorites? And what I said is, what you're doing is you're modeling to the other people in your community what it looks like to care for each other. And
Uh-huh.
maybe your family, who you're all mobile, the kids are older, maybe you should always take the table in the back
Mhm.
and leave tables open for families that need that. But no, it went really, really well. And then she, emailed me later to say that's what they were doing. And families thought it was awesome. I mean, they had a little reserved sign for
Yeah.
that family, and volunteers then were helping the kids. And I think even finding, like, originally it was like, we'll just have food waiting for them. But then when they found out the
Yeah.
kids love picking their own dessert, well, that was kind of fun. Then people got to learn, oh, little Susie, if there's any dessert with cherries in it, she's always going to be getting that. And so we're going to hold some back for her. But no, it was a great conversation.
That's so awesome. And I think a great place to a great note to start to wrap up with, because I feel like as I kind of call myself out in terms of like, oh, I'd have a hard time responding. Like that feels like, oh, so disappointing to hear someone say, well, that wouldn't be fair, because as we know, life is not fair. And our kids definitely did not get a portion of fair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, though, to stay in the conversation past the point of discomfort, to navigate like, okay, well, let's talk about what is fair, what we're going for. And are you willing to actually let go of fair and, oh, this rhymes, let go of fair and move on to care? Oh, you see what we did there? Okay.
Another t-shirt.
That's just another t-shirt. But really, I think it's like, for me, just thinking, okay, yeah, like we're going to be encountered with like responses that just don't make sense in our lives, but they have made sense in the people we're talking to up until now. And we're going to get to be the people to help change that.
Right.
And that happens through conversation, through kind, compassionate, curious conversation.
Right. And Kara, we do need to be mindful of what our face is communicating, because I have to remember, I want to advocate for these kids. And if I come off really angry, and nobody's going to listen to anything that I have to say, that like the leader who said, well, that wouldn't be fair. If I'd have just gone off on her, we wouldn't have had the opportunity. So I am constantly in my head thinking, what's your face communicating? Because sometimes it's communicating. Like,
I have to work on that, because
what are you
my
thinking?
face, when I'm really focused, my face looks very focused. And my focused face, I don't think looks very welcoming or friendly.
I'm right there with you.
It looks very serious. And so I think I look at recordings or whatever. I was like, okay, like we got to practice smiling. Because in my mind, I feel different than my outside body looks like.
Right.
Okay. Well, I hate to rush this goodbye, but I do have a call coming in. And so how can people get in touch with you? I know you have a book recently out. I'd love for you to drop the name of the book. And of course, we'll have links in the show notes.
Okay. KimBotto.com is a great way. I post all kinds of different things. I also have monthly hangouts with ministry leaders who are trying to create spaces for every kid to belong. And we go through practical tips and tools. People will say what they need, and then I create them. And then I did write a book, Boundless Hope for Every Child, Help for the Hurting, Compassion for the Misunderstood, Belonging for the Lonely. Longest tagline ever.
I love the tagline, though. It's beautiful. Yeah. It speaks to like our insights here. Like it definitely, it means something.
Well, kids are hurting. My kids are misunderstood, and they're lonely. So we as a church, we can provide help, we can provide compassion, and we can provide belonging. So Boundless Hope for Every Child, it's available on Amazon, and then KimBotto.com, you can get bulk discounts. Really cool thing. There's a lot of churches and nonprofits that are buying it and then reading it as teens. And there's a discussion guide goes with it and all that. But yeah, go over to KimBotto.com. And then I'm active on Instagram at Kim Botto.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, the links will all be in the show notes as well. And so good to talk to you today. Thank you for spending time with me.
It was fun. Thank you.